My dad gave my sister everything. Then the lawyer pulled out Grandpa's secret will, and her fake smile shattered when I got it all. I was sitting in a stuffy lawyer's office listening to my father's final wishes. The leather chair squeaked every time I shifted, and the air conditioning was broken, making the whole room feel like a pressure cooker. My older sister sat across from me, that practiced smile she'd perfected since we were kids. You know the one, sweet on the surface but calculating underneath. Growing up, she got everything. New car at 16 while I rode the bus. College fully paid at a private university while I worked nights to afford community college. Down payment on her first house at 23 while I was still sleeping on a friend's couch. The pattern was clear. She was the golden child. I was the afterthought. The lawyer, a thin man who looked like he'd been pressed between law books for decades, cleared his throat and started reading. Everything went to my sister. The family house where we grew up, the one with the big backyard and the tree swing Dad built, his contracting business he'd spent 40 years building from nothing, the client list, the equipment, the reputation, even his vintage truck collection that he'd restored one bolt at a time in our garage. My name wasn't mentioned once, not even a photo or a toolbox. It was like I'd been erased from the family story completely. After 28 years of being someone's son, I'd been written out like a typo. My sister's reaction was immediate and theatrical. She gasped, covered her mouth with her manicured hand, shook her head like she'd witnessed a tragedy, but her eyes told a different story. They were already calculating how fast she could liquidate everything, how quickly she could turn Dad's legacy into cash. I could practically see the dollar signs reflected in her pupils. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm so sorry," she said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "This must be really hard for you, but you know Dad always worried about you. Maybe he thought this was best." I pulled my hand back. The implication was clear. I was too irresponsible, too unsuccessful, too much of a disappointment to inherit anything meaningful. The silence in that room felt suffocating. I sat there feeling like I'd been slapped. The lawyer shuffled his papers, clearly uncomfortable. My sister was already texting someone, probably her husband, probably about selling the business. Then the lawyer cleared his throat again. His demeanor changed from routine to something resembling surprise. He pulled out another document, older and yellowed at the edges, like a treasure map from another era. Turns out my grandfather had set up a separate living trust 5 years before he died. It was completely independent of Dad's will, legally binding and untouchable by anyone else. Grandpa must have known something the rest of the family didn't. The trust stated that his commercial property downtown would automatically transfer to me upon my father's death, but only if I'd graduated college and was over 25. Both conditions I'd met just last year. The lawyer handed me the deed with a slight smile like he was in on a secret. My sister's face went through more emotions than a soap opera. Shock, confusion, then pure rage. The practiced smile cracked and fell away completely. She leaned forward, nails tapping aggressively against the mahogany table. "Wait, that old warehouse? In that terrible area?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "What are you going to do with that? It's been empty for years. The neighborhood's a disaster. That's not even worth the property taxes." Her friends nodded along, the ones she'd brought for moral support. They were already whispering, probably about how I got the short end of the stick even in Grandpa's will. I just sat there, holding the deed, trying not to smile. See, what none of them knew is that area had been rezoned last year. The city had approved a massive development project. Tech companies were moving in, coffee shops, restaurants, luxury apartments. The whole neighborhood was transforming. I'd already been contacted by 3 different commercial developers wanting to lease or buy. I'd been sitting on their offers, waiting for this exact moment. My sister kept talking, explaining how I should just sign it over to her since she'd know what to do with it. How she could maybe sell it for me and we'd split whatever pennies it brought. I finally interrupted her. The property was appraised last month. I pulled out my phone and showed her the document. Her face went from smug to white in about 2 seconds. The property was worth $4.2 million, and I'd already accepted a lease agreement that would pay me $60,000 a month.